Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is such a joy to be here. Patty and I have worked very hard to come up with something that I think will delight all of you, and especially those of you who work with teams. Patty?
Oh, hello, hello. Yeah, this is exciting. It's really fun. And I think the thing I really want to say, Linda, where are you going? You're staying up here right now. Is that yesterday was so much fun for me because everything everybody said, I would turn to Linda, I'd go, that's in our presentation, that's in our presentation. So it was like, you know, and then this morning I was laughing because I was thinking, there must be a theme here. You know, I mean, it's so coalesced. So I think that I'm going to be talking I'm a psychologist, and I've been in the field for 40 years. Linda's been in the field for 40 years. She is also a psychologist, right? And so we're going to sort of I'm going to talk from my experience with the kids in this situation, and she's going to add in her vast knowledge across everything. So thank you.
Okay, so where's the clicker?
I don't know.
Here it is.
Oh, look, and it's over there too for us to see.
Our topic is positive maladjustment of gifted teens in a chaotic world. And you're all familiar with this picture of Casimir Dabrowski, the mentor to us all that none of us got a chance to meet. But a person who's been a mentor to both Patty and me is Michael Piechowski. We heard a lot of different pronunciations, Piechowski. I have to tell you that when I first talked to Nick Colangelo, before I met Michael, before I talked to him and asked him how to pronounce his name, he said Piechowski, or at least that's what I thought I heard him say. It took Michael 10 years of our friendship to finally tell me how to pronounce his name. He says, say Piaget. And I say, okay, Piaget. It's Piechowski. Oh, okay, now I know. But he's actually, in our chronology, he worked with Patty before he worked with me. And Patty's going to share with you her experiences being Michael's student.
So here goes the dating of me. I was in grad school early, and that was 1975. And I had just, this is wonderful, I had just studied with Carl Rogers, a humanistic psychologist, and his best friend was Maslow. And, but Maslow wasn't there, but Ram Dass was there. And also the Gestalt therapist. Anyway, so I had been with Carl Rogers the whole summer. And so I was really inundated, you know, with that client-centered inner world, how to be with the person's safety, security. In comes Michael as a professor. And I took several courses with him. And I've got to tell you, he's by far the most brilliant professor I've ever had in my life. Nobody holds a candle to Michael's intelligence. I mean, I love him and admire him so much. So anyway, this happened a couple years ago. Dan, I think you were there. I was talking with Michael, we were at Yanasa, and I said, Michael, what was that? What was the book that you had us read? And I told him the course, you know, the theories of whatever. And he said, that was Dabrowski. And I'm like, that was the hardest book I ever read. So it was 1975, and he had us read Dabrowski. And so there I am coming from a client-centered inner world place. And then here's Dabrowski layered on that. So there was this amazing explosion. You know, I can't even describe to you how it was just like, whoa. I mean, it was just like this epiphany. And so Michael and I worked with him for 2 years as his student. And then we were apart for several years as he went to another place. And then it was 1980, what, Linda?
1980.
80? That I met you at the World Council.
That was later, 87.
87. Well, I saw Michael again in 80, I think. I can't remember, but anyway, I met Anna Marie Roper, I met Linda, and Michael happened to be at that same conference. And
We were on a panel together.
yeah, and Michael and I decided to reconnect. So after that, we started corresponding constantly. And then we created Yanasa with Stephanie Tolan, and the person who funded it is IEA President Betsy Jones. And we met for 2 years and designed a holistic program for gifted kids. And from that point on, we were best friends. And I consider him one of my closest friends in my life. He really is. So I admire him and love him, and his being is within me, and I hope he's with us today.
For sure. Michael, we know you're listening. So Chris showed this particular picture of Michael and Dabrowski, and Michael gave me a copy of this too, so it's one of my treasures. So Michael and I became friends over the book New Voices in Counseling the Gifted, which is another thing that Chris introduced you to in her presentation. There were 2 chapters, one that he wrote on how you can use the overexcitabilities to find the gifted, which we explored for decades after that. And now we're having to deal with the fact that there's a whole segment of the gifted population that don't have overexcitabilities. Okay, now what? But the second chapter by Nick Colangelo's wife, Kay Ogburn Colangelo, and that one has been reprinted in Advanced Development if you want to read it. The journal grew out of the Dabrowski study group at the University of Denver, and you all have a call for manuscripts on your tables that Nancy Miller was kind enough to bring in. Nancy, would you stand? She's our editor of Advanced Development. And it's the only journal on adult giftedness, and it was based on the work that we were doing at the Dabrowski study group that Frank and I started here at the University of Denver. He was chair of sociology and I was chair of gifted education. And I had read New Voices to review it for a book called Contemporary Psychology, which was just a review of psychological books. And I was so taken. Jacob and Liz asked me in the car, and so how did you find out about the theory? And I just went on and on and on about these chapters in New Voices in Counseling the Gifted and what they had meant to me and how excited I got with this information. It was so fabulous to read about the theory. And then I called Michael and I asked him if he believed in reincarnation. That was hello. So after this pregnant pause, he said, well, I didn't to begin with. He has this PhD in microbiology. But then as he got into this theory, he began to have more of a feeling about it. And that grew into a fast friendship, and he came out and he trained all of us at the University of Denver. Right here is where we learned all about the coding system that he had come up with. And Frank and I had this wonderful Dabrowski study group from 1980 until 1985. It was just a heyday where so many presentations and dissertations and master's theses and research studies and instruments, they all happened here at the University of Denver. So before we get into Patty's wonderful study that she wants to share with you, I want to talk just a minute about the concept of positive maladjustment. And I took this out of Mental Growth, which was a book that we studied in great detail in our Dabrowski study group. Positive maladjustment includes both partial adjustment to what is and increasing adjustment to higher levels of development, the concept of what ought to be, and what I want to make happen in myself. It consists of a conflict with and a denial and rejection of those standards, patterns, attitudes, demands, and expectations of one's environment, which are incompatible with one's growing awareness of and loyalty to a higher scale of values. That hierarchy of values is essential to this theory. Positive maladjustment is a prerequisite to the development toward authenticity. Authenticity is another key concept, a dynamism in Dabrowski's theory. So positive maladjustment may be, how many of you have positively maladjusted at some point in your life? Oh, 2 hands go up here. All right. So we are going to be talking about a couple studies that Patty did with gifted teens during COVID that help to explain what positive maladjustment feels like and how especially Patty dealt with these teens. Patty, your turn.
Oh, okay, thank you. I wrote some things down last night as I was thinking about what to share, because I wanted to remember what the kids told me. So let me tell you the truth first. I was not doing a research study. I was hired by a school district in Leon County, Florida. I've worked in Tallahassee before with groups of gifted, only gifted, obviously. And they knew me well. And so the head of giftedness in Florida and the head of giftedness in Leon County said, we want Patty to come and help our kids because they're a mess. The teachers were telling them they're a mess. You know, they can't work, they can't focus, they're not motivated, they're, you know, anxiety ridden. And of course, this is when, you know, everything had changed. The world turned upside down. They weren't in school, you know, their friends were gone. You know, there's a lot of Title I as well, overlap, and there was poverty and there was job loss and there was just so much stuff. And so I was really honored and scared to death because I knew, uh-oh, they're expecting me to work with all these kids and help them find ground again. So what I did is I said, I'm willing to do that 10 sessions, 10, from grades 5th grade through 12th of the whole county. I'm willing to do that if you ask the kids what they need. So what ended up happening was there's 2 states and 2 school districts, but so I'm going to tell you about that. So the first is in Florida. And I said, just ask the kids, what are you most worried about? And then ask them, what do you need help with right now? That's all I wanted to know, because that was going to guide me in how I was going to work with them, right? So they did that. And then, so that's Florida, and that was online, 10 sessions online. The kids were, and so these kids didn't know each other because it was the whole county. So the 5th graders would be with all the county. And so they didn't know some of those kids. So I want you to know that online, some of them chose not to attend. They filled out the survey. So I have the results of the survey, but they didn't attend because it was too scary to be exposed like that. They didn't even know these people, right? They didn't know, well, some of them knew who I was because I'd worked with them already, but some didn't, right? The young ones didn't, high school kids did. And so they didn't know, was I gonna make them talk? Were they gonna be exposed? You see what I mean? So it went all the way from 8, the smallest number, which I don't remember which group it was, all the way to in the 50s that attended, okay? The second part of the research survey was Adams County in Colorado asked me to come and work with the kids, same thing, except I get to do it in person. And I was like, yay, because that's so different. I mean, you read the energy, you're interacting, it's totally different. So they were asked the exact same questions, only high school students. Okay, so it was not meant to be a research, but it ended up being that. And I got to know these kids, and particularly in person, as you can imagine. So here we go. Here are the results of the survey. This shocked me. So you're talking about over 400 kids altogether, okay? The first thing when you brought them together was when you brought all the information together, they knew that their mental health wasn't okay. Fifth graders, I'm not okay. I don't feel stable. I'm really scared. I mean, it was alarming to me to have fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth graders, much less high school kids. Now, remember, they're all dealing with, they're not going to be in school. Graduation isn't going to happen. Fifth grade to middle school. Am I even going to go to middle school? Everything they had expected, everything they had anticipated, everything they had rehearsed in their mind to prepare, right? Because gifted, we always prepare. We rehearse, right, with our minds to get ready, particularly if you have anxiety. If you have any anxiety, you better be rehearsing, right? So they had been rehearsing, and then it's gone, right? Oops. So that was number one. So I'm just gonna, you can see what these are. The second most common thing said by all the kids was, this world is in chaos. Our nation is in chaos. Our state is in chaos. Our family, etc. There were a lot of ethnicity. Black Lives Matter. What's going on? All this hatred, hate crimes, etc. They were overwhelmed. They were horrifically disenchanted with national and state leadership. Horrifically. It bothered them so much. And then at home, like I said, parents had lost their jobs. There was a lot of stress at home. What do gifted kids do emotionally? They pick up the stress of people around them. They care, they love about their parents. Their parents are a mess right inside. So they're handling that. They're handling theirs. You know, it was amazing. So the amount of discord within them, and this is what you're going to talk about too, right? What was going on inside of the outer world, the horrific what is and what ought to be from the inside. Those higher morals and ethics of all the lying, all the deception, all the hatred. They couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle it, you know. The third thing was what I just mentioned already, which is the uncertainty. I thought it was going to be this, and now there's no way to know. And I often say, I tell people a lot when I'm presenting, in my experience clinically, there's three things that gifted people really need to know if you suffer from anxiety. And really, you just need to know, period. Even if all of us suffer from anxiety at some point in our life, it's impossible not to suffer from stress and anxiety. That's just fact, right? It's stability, security, and predictability. And when you don't have stability, security, and predictability, you're scared. Those are the three things clinically that Patty says, that I see it all the time, right? So now all of a sudden, they can't predict anything. You know, the high school kids don't know if we're going to go to college. Am I going to be there? Am I not going to be there? Am I going to meet a roommate? I mean, everything was upside down. Now, the other thing I want to say about catastrophic thinking, and this is something I only work with gifted, obviously, mostly highly and profoundly gifted. I call it the domino effect, because people that are super bright, it's one way that I can tell how bright you are, actually, because I don't do testing like Linda does. She has all that important information. I don't do that. I sit with the person, right? And I'm just with them. When they start going, what if da da da, then da da da, then da da da, then da da da. So like an example would be like if my kid said, what if mom, you know, it's going to snow. I used to live in Colorado. It's going to snow. You better not go out tonight and do this presentation because it's supposed to snow inches and you could go up the side of the mountain. And if you start sliding, then you're not going to be able to stop. And then you won't be able to know where you are. And then it goes down the domino hole into catastrophic thinking. So that's what I was dealing with. The kids that chose to be with me that were brave enough and courageous enough and felt scared enough that they wanted to have some help, okay, they had catastrophic thinking. Now, the other thing to say that is, in my experience, again, clinically, universal. And I did my PhD on profoundly gifted kids because I worked at a school for the profoundly gifted and I was the director of guidance and counseling. So I did my dissertation on that. And 282 kids. And since then, since my dissertation, I have yet to meet a gifted person of any age, because I work with adults and elderly just as much as I do kids, who doesn't say, I want to make a difference in the world. It's a universal value and principle. And they tell me about the importance of that they have to do something. They have to make a difference. And so these kids are saying the same thing. They're scared to death. An earthquake has happened in their life. There's, a bunch of trauma going on around them, in them, through them, and they still need to make a difference. Right? So that was my job. How can we find some solid ground? And my belief is, this is part of the problem, I think, of kids and teens, and even us adults. We think it's got to be something great. Like I remember one of the questions in my dissertation was, what are your goals? And I was looking at qualitative stuff. And everybody said, make a difference. But they were saying things like, I want to find the solution to cancer. They're talking big thing. I want to create world peace, right? They're looking at, like really. My thing is, how can I make a difference today? I've got to make a difference today. And if I make a difference little, and then I'll talk about that later, today, I feel really good because it's part of my mission of life, right? So the last thing that out of the four, there were more, was climate change and environmental damage. And the horror, again, of those in charge that they thought were stupid, because what else do you need but all the proof right around you? And what else do you need but all the science? And they're denying it. They were like, what is going on? It was Twilight Zone. Do you want to say something? No? Okay.
I do, but it'll derail you. So keep going.
Okay, all right. So I always get really hot and thirsty. So here we go. It's my, So I already told you not everybody attended. I told you that in Colorado, the cool thing about Colorado was they only hired me for one session, but it was so magical that they brought me back for two more. It was so much fun. And I loved it. It was like, I would go in my car and cry. It just touched me so deeply. The intimacy that I had with these kids was just beautiful. So the one thing I would say to them is, and it's not my quote, it's from Arthur Ashe, the tennis player. He said, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. It's like, oh, let's start there. Let's be where we are. So, okay, that's what I just wanted to tell you that background. All right. So the other thing you need to know about me is I'm not linear sequential at all. So this is linear sequential. It drives me nuts because last night I was thinking, well, I wish that slide was up here and I wish that was over there because it doesn't make sense to me. It's all a gestalt, it's everything touches each other. Every tributary adds simultaneously. How is it supposed to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? That drives me nuts. For those of you who that is the way you think, I apologize ahead of time because I'm sure I'm going to go like this. And, that's just who I am. So in the outcome, without me going through, I do want to read one thing that I wrote last night. Okay. So the first thing I did, irrespective of in person or online, was to validate, this is crazy. I feel like it's crazy. I would say to them, oh my gosh, da-da-da, and I'd say, and I would name it. I didn't hide that at all. I didn't want to act like they were too sensitive, I wanted to say, wow, all this stuff that's going on. And then I would say, you know what, when I'm nervous, I'd say something like this, when I'm nervous and anxious, my body and my emotions and my mind does things. And I'm curious if you have some of this stuff. And so I would raise my hand, and I also told him, you don't have to talk, by the way. You don't have to say anything this whole time. So they knew that. So I tried to instill some safety. And so what they came up with, what they told me was, these were their signs of stress. On edge, reactionary. I said, how many of you are fighting with your siblings? How many of you are slamming doors? How many of you are your parents getting on your nerves? How many of you feel like your parents are, are like right on top of you because everybody was home? So they didn't have any privacy. And all of a sudden their parents are looking at every single thing they're doing online with their teachers. That was horrible. That was horrible. And so they would retreat to their room, and then they'd get in trouble for retreating in their room and blah, blah, blah. So they felt anxious, they felt angry, they had outbursts, they felt foggy mentally, they felt extreme fatigue, they lacked motivation, they didn't care about schoolwork. And the other thing that was so bad is teachers still cared about schoolwork, and so did parents, and they didn't at all, okay? They were feeling like they didn't know if they'd lost their friends because they now didn't get to see their friends. And friendship is a tenuous thing at best at that age. You know how many 5th and 6th graders are in my office sobbing because one day they're at the chair at the lunch table and the next day there's no chair? Happens all the time. That rotating chair of you're my friend, you're not my friend, you're my friend, you're not my friend, right? So, and they're like, I don't even know if she's gonna like me, or, so they felt alone, lonely, scared, anxious. They were, felt like the world was in chaos and a mess. Okay, so that's all I want to say about that. That's enough. So what did I do other than that? With all the kids in person, and even some of them, I don't remember each one, I'd have to look at all my notes. I did talk about overexcitabilities, because I would say on the very first thing, I'd say, does this feel like a really intense time? Yeah, how many of you? And then I would just say, how many of you ask so many questions inside? How many of you are so curious about what's, I would ask the questions of the overexcitabilities. How many of you feel like you're too sensitive, or you're told you're too sensitive, or you ask too many questions, or you care too much, or you get out of your imagination, or you're too idealistic? Or I would say those things, and I'd say, those are all characteristics. I say, look around. Can you, and they, some of them at some point, there was hybrid. So some were in the classroom and some were online. And so I'd say, look around at the hands, you're not alone. This is part of who we are. This is just part of who we are. So you're not crazy with that. And that was so important to de-escalate their worry of what's wrong with me for being this way, and having others that were just like that was like, made all the difference. So Linda and I have talked about this number 2, which is what I just said. A goal of mine there was to, obviously from me, to help stabilize them again and to give them some tools to do that they could take with them. The other goal, just as important, if not actually more important, was that they weren't alone. Okay, that there was empathy amongst them, and that we could get through it, that this was a horrible, challenging time, but that there's things within us that we can hold on to that will help us through. So the third thing, one thing we talked about was, what can you control and what can't you? There are some things that are going on, we really can't control it. And it's our environment, it's the situation. And what can I control? I can control what dial I tune my mind into. I can change the dial. It's not easy. Remember what Melissa said, not easy to change that dial, but you can do it. And I can help you learn how to do that, right? I have responsibility as an individual to take care of myself. And this was sometimes the first, kids expect their parents to take care of them. They expect their teachers to take care of them. Their parents and teachers were not available. They were in their own mess. So now they had to learn to take care of themselves. And the other thing that was so important was to get them from thinking about the past, what's happened yesterday and the day after and all that. I'm wondering if somebody could go tell them that we're giving a presentation and it's a problem. Thank you. that, thank you, that there's no magic eraser. It is what is. We can know what ought to be, but what we need to do with that is not go way out in the future. We need to do it today. What can I do today? So that conflict and that inner, Frank, I'm thinking of you and what you said, it just fits so much, that self-evaluation, the, what do I have to offer? And I would have them, and I'm going ahead on another slide just to let you know that I have them say, who needs me now? And it could be their dog needed to be taken for a walk and everybody didn't want to take the dog for a walk. It could be the mom was so stressed out. Maybe if they just did the dishes once, it would make such a difference. Maybe if they helped their brother and sister with homework. Who needs me now? And do you know what that is? That's being of service. And when we get out of ourselves, and we're not just inundated with our stuff, and we extend to others, we feel better. That's changing the dial. That's changing the focus. That's making a difference. That's living your good self. That's bringing your goodness forward. That's bringing your caring and your love forward to others. So that's what I was teaching. So the last point is choices matter. And again, I think everybody was saying that yesterday. I mean, that was the other thing I wanted to instill, because we talked a lot about all the horror stuff. And then I was talking about, well, what brings you joy? And we would go through, what's fun? What do you do to make yourself feel good and light and have some energy? And so I would say a few things because I had to start it off, right, to get them to start. So I'd say, I listen to music. And if I love the blues, and I said, sometimes if I'm really sad, the blues really help me cry. Does anybody have any blues? Oh, yeah. And I love rock and roll and I love to dance and I love to cook and I love to go outside. It's like probably my favorite thing, connect with. And so then they start saying, and what do you do? And so then we would make a list of all the little things every day, not the big things, not like I want to go to, Timbuktu and have a big vacation. Today, what's some joy that I could have? What's some fun that I could have? What could I do to intersperse with the darkness of the world and that I'm dealing with that makes me feel better? And the slide will say, how can I lace that? Something I made up, like lacing a shoe. I told them, I said, you just do some work for 15, 20 minutes, then you lace it with something fun. Then you do some work for 15 or 20 minutes, then you lace it with something fun. I said, that's how you get through your day. So we would talk about how to lace it, right? So I think I want to stop there and let you say.
Well, actually, I wanted to say several different things while you were talking, but I really felt like I wanted you to get through all of the wonderful research that you did. You mentioned that we do testing at our office, and we did do counseling, but right now we're in need of a counselor. But I did do counseling years ago. I don't do that now. But the testing, I think, is important. And I wanted to share with you that over the last 43 years, we've tested around 6,500 gifted and twice exceptional kids, many, many, many profoundly gifted kids, over 1,000 that are above 160 IQ. And we have all of the overexcitability inventories at our center. We developed them, many of them here, and Frank and Nancy also at the University of Akron developed the OEQ2. But because we're giving the overexcitability inventories to all of our clients, everyone who comes for testing, we're collecting a lot of wonderful data. And we just want to invite everybody who's watching this from afar or who's in the room to consider using our database. And Frank will be revising our guidelines. He's just told me this morning they're a little too stringent, but we do have some procedures in place, And of course, you would have to respect the confidentiality of the information. But we are looking for researchers who are interested in looking at the data. We do see some fascinating patterns, and I think you would too. But the testing, you use the term, Patty, validating. And the testing validates. It validates the parents' perceptions so that when they go to school, they're not just saying, well, I think my child is smart, but they actually have data to say, you know, my child is highly gifted and bored, and I'm wondering what you can do. Here's the report. What can you do to advance my child in mathematics, or to give more advanced reading, or to accelerate, or whatever? And it validates the kids. They feel like, okay, I'm not just lazy. I'm not just stupid. I actually have a dyslexia or a dysgraphia issue, or I do have a difficult time concentrating, and that's going to help me get some accommodations in school. Or I've got some sensory issues, and my eye-hand coordination just isn't so good, so I hate doing handwriting. That's the biggest issue of our underachievers is handwriting. So we recommend in our 504 plans that we write that they get access to a computer. And those 504 plans or individual education plans, or whatever you want to call them, and wherever you're watching this from, they make a difference. When you get the school to be able to accommodate to the child, it makes a difference. But validation is important. And that's, I think, a theme here that Patty was sharing, and that we do, is that feeling that I'm not crazy.
How long do we have, by the way? Yay. Okay, good. I was thinking like, 10 minutes or something. Okay. I want to comment on what Linda said. I think Linda does counseling there, because validating is like counseling. I mean, I refer to them all the time, and it makes a difference in their life to be seen, to really be understood and seen. It's one of the biggest things there is. So no question about it. Okay, so, I think that our experience, I do think it, but I experience that one of the greatest vulnerabilities of being gifted, and particularly highly and profoundly gifted, is there's so many kudos for your mind. And there's kudos you give yourself, which that's good, you have some confidence, but then you get this recognition and expectation of performance, etc. And everything's focused on your mind and what your mind can produce. And over the years, and I was in Illinois, then I was in Colorado, and in Florida, thousands of people from ages 3 to 87. I've had people travel to see me because you're a specialist, right? And over the years, I've seen over and over and over. As a matter of fact, I've tested this hypothesis consciously 1,000 times, and that is that you're more than your mind. And if you are going to feel healthy, if you are going to feel contented in your life, you must recognize and respect and live out of all 5 domains of who you are. You are not just a mind. You have emotions and a heart. You have a body, your vehicle. And by the way, I follow this research. The thoughts, the emotion, and the body, they cannot tell which thing initiates the other. They are such simultaneous, instant experiences of reaction with each other that they're uncertain. Is it the thought that creates the body alertness? Is it the body alertness that creates, it's so automatic, it's so quick. So we must see, and here's the other thing, we must recognize people poo-poo the emotions. Do you know how many brilliant people have said to me, I wish my emotions would just be quiet because, I really want to do what I'm trying to do. It's a pain in the rear, right? Is what they think. That's the opposite of what I'm saying. And so it's not only recognizing, people say, Patty, what are the steps? The steps to me are recognizing acknowledgement, respecting, listening to, excuse me, second one is listen to. So what does that mean? Michael asked me this. What does that mean, listen to? Because I don't know how to do that. What are you talking about? I said, well, all you do is you just sort of tune in and you say, what am I thinking? What have I been thinking? And then you go here and you go, what am I feeling? What's my heart feeling right now? And then you sort of scan your body and you say, what is my body? Is my tense anywhere? How do I feel? You know, how do the different parts of my body? And then I love Louise Hay's because it's all symbolic of all the different parts of your body and what it attributes to and all that. So I love the symbolism of that. And then social relationships. How do I feel? Am I alone? Do I feel like I need to connect, etc.? Do I feel lonely? Do I feel alienated? And spiritually, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, the core self. You know, these kids in trauma, you know, some of these kids come from highly religious families. And the incongruence, you know, of life experience and those beliefs, as you know, gifted kids and gifted people tend to ask questions, you know. And so we talk about the inside ethics and morals and values and just checking in. And so I put the bottom two together a lot because, oh, there's so much I could say. We want to belong. Everybody wants to belong. Everybody wants to have a friend. And sometimes, particularly teens, this is one of the sessions I did with the Adams County kids, the second session, was on friendship and trying to be perfect and trying to fit in. And, you know, you can't sacrifice your values, your ethics, and your morals, because when you do, it never lets you go. It will rattle you for the rest of your life. And does that stink? You know what I'm talking about? Things you've done or things you've said or things you've been, and you thought, and you still remember it. And it's 25 years ago. You know, so it's just vitally important. And when balance means living out of all five, balance does not mean equilibrium. It means we're going to use our mind the most because that's really, you know, happening. It's always talking, it's always there. It's just checking in and listening to. And I tell people, expect a war, expect that there's going to be conflicts, and then you need to listen to the conflicts, because that's all information. So that's what we do in therapy, of course. So here's what I think I've already said a little bit. There's the domino I told you about, the worry, the fret, the anxiety, the amygdala, I teach them about that. You know, it's automatic. And how do you respond to that? I want to say right here, because there is research on this. You know, APA, I belong to APA, and there was like, oh my gosh, their monitor, if you want to read some good articles, APA monitor is exceptional. And during the pandemic, they had exceptional research articles.
Come to my house, I have them all.
They're so good. And they talked about the most recent, you know, because there's lots of breathing techniques and yoga and mindfulness and all that. But the most recent thing, and so I'm just going to tell you real quick so you know it, you can do it. And I was practicing with the kids this. You breathe in 5, you breathe out 7, you hold your breath for 3. It's 5, 7, 3. Then you do it again. Now what I did with, and you do it for 90 seconds, and it takes you from the sympathetic amygdala nervous system to the parasympathetic, okay, to calming, all right? So what I did to help the kids is I would say, we're gonna walk the block. We're gonna walk around the block. So I would say, we're gonna start at the upper left, and we would close our eyes. We would imagine we're up in the upper left, and we're gonna walk around the block. And then that way I'd go in, and I'd count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hold, 1, 2, 3. Okay, go to the right. We're gonna walk down the block. 1, 2, you see what I mean? So then they could imagine going around the block, and they didn't have to think about the 90 seconds or anything like that. So isn't it funny, this quote from Mark Twain, I've had many problems in my life, most of which never happened. It's just too poignant not to have it in there. So what I want to say, and I've already said it, your mind creates your reality. Your mind is the perspective from which you see the world. Your mind and your emotions, it's true, but your phenomenological experience, the I, is largely from the mind and your perspective. So again, I like the thought of change the dial. Okay, change the dial. I'm going to say more about that. I'm going to get on to the more important thing. This to me, other than the 5 domains, which again, clinically, I have yet to have that disproven, and I could tell you hundreds of clinical stories about that. This happened to me, this was a vision while I was sitting with a profoundly gifted woman client 30 years ago. and I'd been working with her, and I teach the kids this, not in this way, but we talk about it, the golden core. And I saw that what we kept on talking about was the outer circle, the world, the experience of life itself, how we interact with the world. So think about the world of what I'm talking about here, a chaotic world. I've already said all that. You get it, the outside world. And how can I interact with that? What mask do I need to put up? And I want to give a big Yahoo for masks. I don't want anybody to think that we're not supposed to have masks. Masks are very healthy and needed. Okay. Everybody does not have to see your inner world, right? So it's okay to have masks, right? And, you know, unfortunately for some gifted people that are highly sensitive, people see that anyway, right? So that's a little scary. So anyway, so it's the outer world, it's homework, it's what parents expect, it's what I expect of myself, it's do I belong, how do I look, how do I dress, you know, do I have a place to sit at the table? All those things, that's that outer circle. That's our interaction with the world. Then you go in a little bit, and we don't want everybody to know our stresses and our fears. We don't want to tell them that. So we try to hide that. Now, when we're really anxious, I usually do a zigzag line because it comes out anyway, right? You can't fully hide it. Deeper than that is what's happened to you in your life. And the primary thing is at home, what's happened with your siblings, what's happened with your parents, what's happened with your grandparents, what's happened at school, what has and what has not happened, right? It imprints you. But I always say, you're more than your imprint. You're more than your imprint. You're more than the outer world. You're more than your roles. You're more than your homework.
Very Dabrowski.
You're more than your mind. You know what you are, you know who you are, you're all those things, and you have this beautiful golden core. And so oftentimes I cry at this point because I talk a lot to parents, a lot of presentations to parents, and I always talk about this because I say, I want you to know I'm a parent of 4 and a grandmother now of 3 under age 2. I say your primary role, I believe this, as a parent, is to see the golden core of your child. It is their innate seeds, essence. It is their spirit. It is their goodness, their love energy, their passions, their joys. You know, it's so important that you validate that because everybody else is validating the outer circle, right? What I said before, the vulnerability of that. So, and then I believe that as a therapist, but I believe this for my life, and I believe it, I just believe it, is that our role as we mature is to get past those other outside things. It's like take an arrow and dive in and meet and learn about your golden core. And it changes and evolves. It grows over time as you start interact. And then the goal is you interact with the world from that golden core. So you put the arrow going out. And I believe that's the life process. And that's the process of Dabrowski, really, of dealing with the outer world, going to the inner world, to the depth of the inner goodness, living from that goodness. First of all, you have to know it's there. So as a parent, that's my job. As a therapist, it certainly is my job. Do you want to jump in right now? Okay. So the title of this is called Listen Within. And again, this is like 3 decades ago. I was asked in Chicago, actually, to talk to 5th graders and 5th to 8th graders. And they wanted me to talk about anxiety and depression, you know, and they wanted me to help these kids understand it. And so I came up with a list way back then that I have used since then. That yes, it does talk about depression, but it's the list I used with the kids that I just told you about, right? So look at this list. So I say, what brings you the greatest joy? What makes your heart sing? What do I really care about? That's the I. That's you saying that. You answer these questions. And I ask parents, talk about this around the dinner table. Don't talk about all of them, talk about one at a time. Just sort of bring it up so everybody gets familiar. Then you go outside of the self from the I to the we, to the world. What is truly essential? What does the world really need? So now it's the I to the we, and then it circles back to how can I interact with the we? How are we one? And if COVID did anything, and Black Lives Matter did anything, it let us know we are connected. It let us know that we affect each other every day, every breath, actually. So then you go from the I to the we to the all. Who needs me? And I already told you about that. Does the dog need you? Does your mom need you? Does your brother need you? Does your neighbor need you? And how can I be of service? I want you to say something now.
I was listening to this list and I was wishing that all of our testers would ask these questions of all our clients. I just think they're so important. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. That's so funny. Okay, wait a minute. Oops, hold on. Oh, no, this is it. Okay. So on the little abstract we had to write, I said what adults can do, okay, or something like that. And so I wanted to give you what I think we need to do. And that is, now this is research I did, by the way. For 20 years, long time ago, I literally have a box and I asked my clients, and again, from kindergarten through college, and I gave them little 3x5 cards. Because I was always presenting. So I said, what do you want me to tell your teacher? And they'd write that down. What do you want me to tell your parent? And they'd write that down. And then I kept it. And I have a lot of them. And the bottom line was number one for the teacher and the parent. What does that mean? It means see me. Yes, I'm like grandma and grandpa. Yes, I'm a mathematician like grandpa. Yes, I remind you of Aunt Judy. Yes, I can do things like my brother Larry. You know what I mean? Yes, that feels good because it means that I'm connected with the family. So I'm similar. But kids need to know that you see their difference. And more important than that you see their uniqueness. And that's the golden core. So see me, hear me, mom and dad. Know me, and I want to add, and allow me to be different from you. Allow me to think differently. Allow me to feel whatever I feel. Allow me to question whatever I question. Allow me to be me and see me and respect me. That is vital. What do I have to offer goes back to me asking them today. What can you offer today? I think, do you want to say anything before we get to this?
Yes, keep going. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, honey, here we are. So then people have asked me, Patty, give me a list. Okay, so I gave them a list. Notice the words, choose. And I say to people, you don't have to choose this. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we're not ready, but it's always a choice. And there is internal timing, just like Melissa talked about, there is an internal timing when you say, I just have to make this change. So I would say to the kids, by the way, I'd say, you know what, after our conversation today, I'd be talking to them, you may choose to make some changes or not. And you can choose any of the things we talked about or not. And you get to make that choice every day, all day long. I just want you to be aware of those choices so that you can decide if that feels good, if those choices resonate in a loving, light-filled way, or if it feels cruddy. And if it feels cruddy, physically, emotionally, if it feels cruddy, that means probably not the greatest choice. So again, what am I asking? Tune in, listen to your body, listen to your emotions. And I'll say, if you don't know what you're thinking, here's another thing, I gotta tell you this. I always say weed the garden because your mind is a garden to me. And so we have to know what are the weeds and what are the flowers. But weeds have a very deep root system because we all have weeds and they have lived there a long time. Okay. So you need to be able to, just like a garden, you need to look at the little plants coming up, the little buds, and it's very hard when it first comes up to tell the weeds from the flowers, right? But over time, if you don't know what you were thinking, in other words, what you were holding on to in your mind, this is how you find out. You go through the back door and you say, how am I feeling? And if you're going, that means that thought wasn't that great. So let's go back and ask, what was I thinking? What was I thinking that I feel so cruddy? What was I thinking that I have an upset stomach? What was I feeling that I can't sleep at night? Or what was I thinking that I can't sleep at night? What am I thinking all day long? So, number one, recognize, listen to, and respect all 5 domains every day. You don't have to do it all day long. I just want you to be aware, consciously aware. You make choices from that point. Number 2, the number 1 cause of depression is lack of sleep. There are other causes, but that's the number 1 cause. Lack of sleep. What do teens do? Yeah, they stay up till 2 o'clock because they got to get that A. You know what I'm saying? And they don't. And then stupid schools have them have to be there at 7 in the morning or catch the bus at 7. So the sleep is vital. Food is vital. And by the way, I've checked this out with nutritionists in my audience and pediatricians. I always say, don't worry about the fruits and vegetables. Worry about the protein. It's all about the protein and some carbs. Don't worry about the carbs because they're going to eat them anyway. They're going to eat Doritos.
Okay.
You know.
I'm butting in.
Oh, good.
Protein, yes. If you've got a child with ADHD, protein. It stabilizes the metabolism and allows people to concentrate better.
Exactly. Okay, that's number 2. That's another choice. That's a lot of choosing right there, isn't it? Number 3. This is so important. Why? Because when you are stressed or when you're depressed, you have tunnel vision by definition. And when you go outside, it's hot and it's sunny and the birds are singing and there are flowers and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that your senses get alert to. So you go from inner tunnel to outer. And here's the other magic. How many of you have realized over and over again that your inner world is related to the seasons? How many of you realize this? Yeah. How many of you realize that your inner world is related to the moon? Yeah, I mean, we're connected. And so it's just so fun when you go outside and like the Native Americans would say, all my relations are talking to me. All my relations. So the clouds are talking to me. The wind is talking to me. The rocks are talking to me. The stream is talking to me. Am I willing to receive the message? The synchronicity of life, the order of life is real. Even if you don't believe anything at all, theologically or religion, you got to admit there is some universal order going on. Because man, it doesn't mess up. It's nighttime and morning time. You know what I mean? I mean, it doesn't ever mess up. There is an order beyond us. And you might as well go experience it. Makes a huge difference in life. People say, what's the most important thing? I say, look at all 5 domains and get outside for the healing. If you want to really heal, pay attention to all 5 domains, get outside. The next one is it's from that lace I told you about, work and pleasure. And then I also told the kids, can you play some tag every day? Just sort of like think of one little thing. It could be that your mom made meatloaf and that's your favorite meal, you know, that you appreciate or be thankful for. And if it's hard to laugh because you're so scared, turn on a comedy or read a funny book or look at Calvin's and Hobbes, or you know what I mean? Or play with your kitten. Kittens are the funniest thing in the world, aren't they? All over the place, you know, and little puppies and all that. I mean, you get to decide what brings you joy and fun and laughter. But if we would practice, it is turning the dial. Is it my time? Yep. It is turning the dial to be thankful or appreciative. I'm almost done. I'm almost here. So you are a magnet. Realize that what you put out comes back. What you put out comes back. What you put out comes back. You're going to be closed. You're going to be open. What do you hold on to? And my last one, and then Linda's going to close. Give yourself a gift each week. Recognize that you've worked hard. Recognize that life isn't easy. Give yourself a gift. I like flowers.
Me too. If I had to choose between flowers and food, flowers. So I'm going to put Lance on the spot. You were nodding your head like a bobbing duck the whole time that Patty was talking. And I wondered if there was anything you would like to share. You're one of our youngest people here, if not the youngest. Her presentation spoke to you. Is there something you could share with us? I think we need to give him a mic, right?
You have to come up here and you have to be quick.
I'm pretty loud too. I can scream
Nope,
out with
they
this
can't
thing.
do.
Oh, Zoom. Right,
Thank you
right.
so much.
Thank you, Lance.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there we go. Oh yeah. Yeah, I really related to a lot of what you had to say. I thought, yeah, it was important that that people recognize in their kids that they're their own individual and need to feel things and work through things on their own. And also, I don't know, I thought COVID was a really hard time. I definitely related a lot to what you had to say with that. And the recognizing your own mental health being bad, but not necessarily knowing what to do with it
Yeah.
is a really hard one. It's like you're sitting in your bed, you don't know what to do.
Yes.
You know something's wrong, but you can't even get the motivation to go and do things. So I really
Yes.
thought, yeah, you just had some important stuff to say there.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Good,
Yeah, no,
thank you.
thank you guys.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you, everyone.